Hello, welcome to Movie Moments. Today, I'll be narrating a Nollywood movie titled Anikulapo, released in 2022. You ready? Let's go. The movie opens with a strange bird hovering over a dead body. The bird lands next to the body, drops an object, and brings it back to life. The narrator in the movie tells of a strange akala bird in the Yoruba land, which has the power of resurrection. Whenever a body is tossed into the forest to decay, the bird finds and revives it. That's exactly what happened to the young man we just saw, but this does not happen very often. There appears to be a festival in Oyo in a kingdom called Orile. People have traveled far and wide with their processions to celebrate. A young traveler, Saro, is also seen entering through the palace gates. When he's asked by the guards if he came for the festival, he replies he's not there for the festival, then proceeds into the kingdom. Saro stops for a nap in a shed owned by a woman named Awarun, one of the villagers. She wakes him up and inquires why he's there, and he responds he came to make a living for himself with his trade. At the palace, the king of Orile, called Kabiesi by his people, holds a meeting with his chiefs. Meanwhile, in the courtyard, the Kabiesi's wives taunt Arolake, the barren wife of the king, who happens to be the youngest and the king's favorite. They treat her as the plague, except for the first wife, who tries to defend her. After giving Saro some food, Awarun offers him a job in her clay business to help him raise money to start his own trade. Saro frowns at the job, saying it's too dirty, but eventually agrees to work for her. Arolake visits Queen Wojuola to get her mirror, but the jealous queen makes jest of her. Arolake returns to her chambers upset. Later that night, the king visits Wojuola, but she lets her jealousy get the best of her, making the king leave her chambers for Arolake's chambers, who is not so pleased to entertain the king every night. That same night, Awarun visits Saro and they sleep together. The following day, Saro gets a big portion of food and the other workers seem jealous of him. Meanwhile, Queen Wojola visits Arolake to confront her about the king's decision to lay with her each night when it's not her turn to be with him, then threatens to deal with her if it happens again. Saro, on the other hand, continues to warm his employer's bed. One day in the market, a man warns him about his affair with the woman, how she turns young men into her lovers, then her slaves. One night, it's the third wife's turn to warm the king's bed, but Arolake sends word to the king that she's feeling feverish. The king hurries to her and turns out she was just pretending so the king doesn't go to the other wife, just to spite the queen for humiliating her earlier. Awarun has grown so fond of Saro, she gets him his own place and he starts his weaving business and soon starts getting customers. Saro takes a stroll around the marketplace. There he sees a man on a horse. Later that night, he waits in his house for Awarun, who doesn't come. Saro decides to go to her instead and finds her with the same man he saw earlier. Awarun visits Saro the next day, but he is not receptive of her. Inquiring who the man was, she in turn warns him never to query her again, saying she can do as she pleases with anyone. Then Saro remembers the warning the young man gave him about her being a man-eater. Awarun visits Saro days later to reason with him and tells him she recommended him as the dressmaker for the king's wives and maidens. The news excites him instantly. Saro visits the palace the next day with samples for the queens. They all make their pick except Arolake, who is not with them. A maiden goes to call for her after the queens had gone. Saro can't help but stare at her the whole time. Arolake follows Saro that night and mates with him in the bush. The princess Omaomi also seemed to have taken interest in Saro. She tells her mother to make him come back to the palace. After his escapade with the queen, Saro gets home and finds Awarun waiting for him. She questions him of his whereabouts, but he doesn't say much. Princess Omaomi visits Arolake and expresses her interest in Saro to her. Saro visits the palace later that day and stares at Arolake's shed. He waits till nightfall at the spot they met the last time, but she doesn't come. He's surprised to get home and find her waiting for him. After having her way with Saro, Arolake comes back to find Omaomi waiting on her, who inquires where she has been. She makes up some excuses and the girl believes. The next day, Awarun warns Saro to stop what he's doing, but he still continues his affair with Arolake. Arolake tells Saro she was married off to the king when she was only 15 years old, and how the other wives detest her for being the king's favorite and tried to poison her, but luckily she survived. Saro also talks about how he was sold at age 6 into slavery to pay off his father's debt. After sharing their stories, they both decide to elope. Unbeknownst to them, Princess Omawumi followed Arolake to Saro's house and heard their conversation. Arolake rushes back to the palace to pack her things. She finds Omawumi crying in her room. The girl is upset and calls her names, then walks out on her. Arolake immediately packs her things and sneaks out of the palace, while Omawumi runs to report to her mother. Saro also packs his things, and just as he's about leaving, he's arrested by the palace guards with a mob of angry villagers. Arolake hides in the bush and watches as Saro is taken away. Saro is brought before the king and the council of elders. The king convicts Saro and tells his guards to take him and do with him as they please. The guards take Saro into the forest and beat him up, then leave him for dead. Arolake hid and watched as Saro was beaten mercilessly. After the guards leave, she rushed to him, but he's already dead. She lays there and mourns him till morning. When she's woken by a screeching sound, she hurries and hides in the bush and watches as the mysterious bird brings Saro back to life. The bird speaks to Saro and decides he deserves to die. Arolake, hearing this, rushes out of the bush and hits the bird with a stick, causing it to fly away, leaving a strange substance behind, which she carries. She helps Saro up and they both run away, far from the village. Night and day they keep walking. Soon they stop by to rest somewhere in the forest. While Saro goes in search of food, Arolake looks at the strange object she took from the bird, wondering what it is. She hides it as Saro comes back with some fruits. They keep walking, hoping to find a village soon. Luckily, they run into a hunter who helps them out. They spend the night with him in the forest while he hunts. The next day, he takes them to his home only to find a crowd gathered at his house, crying over his son's dead body. Arolake draws Saro by the side and tells him about the object she took from the bird, believing it's what the akala bird used to revive Saro. She tells him they can make the most of the situation. He should take the power and use it to raise the boy to life. Saro takes it and brings the boy to life. The villagers, seeing this, run away. The hunter and wife are actually very happy and they treat them to a good meal while showering them with praises. A messenger approaches asking for Saro, who has been summoned by the king. He's followed by a group of women singing, "Anikulapo is with us, we have no fear of death." Saro is brought before the king and his cabinet. They inquire of his ability to raise the dead, speaking of their fear for such great powers. The king, however, urges him to stay in their village for a while. Saro and Arolake are given a place to stay. He continues raising people from the dead, and the people in turn showers him with gifts and food. One day, Saro comes back home and he can't seem to take his eyes off a young lady making Arolake's hair. On the other side, the chief priest visits the king and his cabinets, warning them of Saro, but they say he's only jealous because he can't raise the dead like Saro does. Meanwhile, Saro lures the girl, Omo, into his bed. The next day, he is summoned by the king and his cabinet. They all want to know the source of his powers and tells him to surrender his god, that's the strange object, to the chief priest to be examined, but he refuses. Omowan slumps at home and Arolake helps her up. She realizes Omowan is pregnant and asks her who the father is. Saro walks in and inquires what is happening. He asks the girl and she signals that he is the father. He sends her out and tells Arolake not to worry, it's not a big deal. He claims he did it so they could have children, but she's broken and in tears. She remembers how her former co-wives would tease her about being barren and nothing but an object of pleasure for men. 8 years later, and Saro seems to have taken another wife, Bimpe, together with Omowan, who has given him 2 children. Arolake is still without child and has become an object of ridicule for her co-wives, who treat her just like the queens did back at the palace. Saro is also not very defensive of her either, despite her support to him. Later that night, Arolake confronts Saro about revealing that she's a former queen to his new wife. An argument ensues between them, making Saro slap Arolake. She does not react, however, but walks away disappointed. Saro is summoned to the palace the next day to revive the prince who just died. But first, he makes his demands to have the princess as his wife. The king is not happy with his demands, and Saro says they are ungrateful people. He agrees to wake the prince only if the king agrees to give his daughter to him. As he takes his leave, the king's mouthpiece raises his dagger at him, but he's stopped by the chiefs. Two helpers at Saro's house talk about the recent happenings at the king's palace, and Arolake overhears everything. She then decides to pack up and leave. Saro comes home later to find out she's gone and doesn't bother going after her. Immediately, the king's guard comes to call him, saying the king has agreed to his terms. Saro visits the palace and earnestly tries to wake the prince, but it doesn't work. Then he realizes Arolake poured away the substance inside the gourd before she left, thereby making it useless. Saro is later found dead on a hill, probably by the king's orders. But yet again, the akala bird visits and brings him back to life. The end. What's your take on this movie? Comment down below. Also, please like and subscribe to the channel. Tune in for more on Movie Moments.